All right, how many times have you been online, eBay, or any of the popular kind of forums and places people sell gear out here, and you picked out one of these beautiful pieces of gear like here on this page, maybe a nice Macintosh or a Fisher 500C or a Supro guitar amplifier or a piece of ham radio equipment, something really nice that's kind of withstood the test of time. A lot of this gear is getting on up there 40, 50, 60 years old, but this stuff looks in really great shape, and you submit your bid, or you kind of say, hey, I'm going to buy that, and you send your payment, and then what shows up to your house a couple days to a week later doesn't end up looking exactly like what you're seeing in the pictures. It's got some dings, some damage, tubes broken, various issues. Well, oftentimes that is the result of improper packing. So I want to make a video today on how to go about properly packing your vintage gear like this. What I'm going to show you is not the only way to do it properly. It is one of the better ways that I know, using materials that you can find in your own little local town to do it properly. All right, let's start here with what not to use in packing your vintage gear. First one on the list, newspaper. I don't care what anyone tells you, do not use this. I don't care how much of it you crumple up and put in there. It will flatten out, decompress, it will not hold its shape, and it will not support your gear inside of a box. Never, ever, never, ever. Peanuts. While they seem like a logical choice, not for heavy gear. The heavy gear will compress the peanuts, and I'll show you an example here in a minute of something that was shipped in peanuts and the result of that shipping. Do not do it. Do not use duct tape on the outer of the box. This stuff easily gets pulled up in one corner, and then because it's so tacky, it kind of rolls. Next thing you know, it's kind of came off of your box and it didn't hold your box intact. Don't use it. Don't use paint tape, the old kind of manila colored or the blue paint tape. It's not sturdy enough. Do not use insulate foam. It's styrofoam between two foil labors. It's cheaper than what I'm going to show you to use, but don't use it. It will not hold up well. The little styrofoam beads inside of that will come all to pieces, and you will have the biggest mess you've ever seen. And then I've seen some other random stuff used: towels, craft paper, blankets, whatnot. Don't do it. Don't skimp out. If you're shipping a very expensive, nice piece of gear that's made it through 50 or 60 years, take the time to pack these things properly. So here's what you are going to want to obtain before you start packing your valuable gear. One, you're going to want some inner boxes, about 2 inches larger all the way around than what you're packing, than the item you're packing. You're going to want some outer boxes that are 2 inches larger all the way around than your inner boxes. You're going to want to use polystyrene foam board insulation. Comes in 4x8 sheets at your local hardware store. I use some 3/4 inch thick, and I also use some 1 inch thick, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Get you some large bubble wrap, anything with 3/4 to 1 inch size bubbles on it. If you've got some tube gear and you're going to be pulling the tubes out, use some smaller bubble wrap for that. And then use some heavy duty packing tape. I prefer the 3-inch wide packing tape, but 2-inch wide tape will work. Personally, I use reinforced craft tape, but it requires a wet tape machine to apply it, and I'll show you that here in a minute as well. All right, and then I'll finally leave you with some heavily recommended tips before we dive into actually packing something. If you're shipping tube gear, remove all of the tubes. Wrap each one of those tubes using a small sheet of bubble wrap, or if you don't have that and you have the proper size tube boxes for those, put them in that. Then put those with some packing inside of a separate box. Pay the extra $10 to ship the tubes separate from the piece of gear. I know it seems like overkill, but a lot of these pieces of gear will have $200 or $300 worth of tubes in them. Way too often have I seen gear show up and the tubes are all busted up. So pay the money there. If your unit has heavy transformers in it, so it's a Fisher 500C or something of that nature, and it has a wooden case, please consider removing the stereo unit from the wooden chassis and ship them separately. The reason for that, the weight of the chassis and those heavy transformers themselves shifting around can actually just totally destroy the wooden chassis, and I'll show you an example of that here in a minute. And my last tip, I bought way too much gear that I've received and it turned out to be damaged and it wasn't packed well, and I went back to the individual and they were like, yeah, I really didn't have the best packing material, but I put insurance on it. Well, that's not an excuse, and it's not something we want to have to deal with, because typically the insurance pays back to the shipper, not to the recipient, which means the person shipping it, you got to provide them all kinds of information. They've got to file a claim. It's just a long nightmare. And at the end of the day, you've got a beautiful piece of gear that has been ruined. It's not worth doing. So pack the stuff right. I'd rather pack it right and not pay insurance, skip the money on that, and invest it in the packing right than I would the other way around. Okay, see this beautiful piece of Luxman gear here? It's a 38 FD. So this was the picture the individual sent me before I bought this on over the internet. And it had all the tubes inside of it, and it was in this nice wooden chassis, okay? When I got it, this is what the wooden chassis ended up looking like. So what they did is they took this amplifier and they dropped it into a great big box that was way bigger than the amplifier. There had to be 6 to 8 inches of spare room all the way around. They filled it up with peanuts, and that's all there was protecting this thing, which allowed the weight of the chassis and the transformers in this thing to basically shred this wooden chassis all to pieces. As you can see here, it bent wooden pieces here. It shredded joints and little blocks that were glued to connect this thing. I've seen this over and over. And then on top of that, I even asked the individual, please pull the tubes out, wrap them individually, which they did. And unfortunately, 2 of these tubes still got busted. I don't know whether they just didn't get packed well enough or what, but as you can see here, I've got a mess, and I'm gonna have to pay somebody probably a couple $100 to get this thing fixed at this point in time. So sadly, that's what I ended up with, and I've seen it with Fisher 400s and 500s. I've seen the chassis get shredded like this as well. So let's pack these things right so we don't have this happen. Most cities will have a little packing store of some site like this. This is where I buy my boxes at. All right, I'm going to get some 14 by 14 and some 16 by 16 boxes here at $6 a piece. All right, I'm here at your local Lowe's hardware store. I do not buy the stuff with the white styrofoam things inside of it. I get this solid green Green Guard XPS stuff here. I always get a 1-inch sheet and a 3/4 inch sheet. And as you can see here, $17.98 for a 1-inch sheet and $17.48 for a 3/4 inch sheet. You need a big vehicle to get this home. Do not try hauling this on the back of an open truck or anything. I know this stuff's a few dollars cheaper. Do not do it. This is the, it's got 2 sheets of like aluminum on the outside with styrofoam pellets on the inside. You will have the biggest mess you've ever seen in your life, and it does not do a good job protecting your stuff when you're shipping it. Okay, Lowe's also carries this stuff. It's $30 for a 250-foot roll. You can get it cheaper on eBay by a few dollars, but you know, if you don't want to go to the trouble of that, you can also get here for $20 a 12-inch wrap. I happen to have enough of each of these at home that I don't need to buy any, but I'm just showing you what you could come by if needed to be when packing this. This I use for tubes and smaller stuff. This I use to wrap around the amplifier itself. Okay, as you can see, I've got the 14 by 14 inch box kind of folded over at this point. And I use, you can use one of 2 things. This is 3-inch wide tape. It's made by Best Pack, and it's really good for wrapping, but I've also used many times the good old 3M Scotch 2-inch tape here. I keep in a tape gun. Either one of those is fine, but actually what I use, not everybody's going to have one of these, and sorry for the mess here, but this is a gummed tape machine, and you kind of crank on it, and it wets the tape, and I'll show you here after I get it on here. What it ends up doing then is it actually glues to the box itself, and it's reinforced with fiberglass strands throughout it. Very, very, very difficult for that to cut, tear, or come apart on you. And as you can see here, I've now taken the leak amplifier and just set it down inside of this box. And if you'll notice, I've got about 2.5 inches on those two sides and about 2 inches on each side here. I just did this for representative to show you the sizing. We're going to want to put about 2 inches of foam underneath of the amplifiers. Then you can see here, I just kind of measured and scored off, and I went a little bit shorter than 14 inches. It was like 13 7/8, and I just kind of scored it all the way down using just a plain old razor knife, and then we'll come from the back side and pop it and it'll break in half. Sorry I couldn't show that and do it at the same time, but it's as simple as just pushing it from the back side really hard and it'll pop. As long as you score it about halfway through all the way down. And now I just need to measure and do the same 14-inch cuts again, and I'll end up with little square pieces I can drop down in the box. And as you can see now, I've got 3 sheets of this stuff cut, 14 by 40. They're not perfect. You can see my edges here where I sliced them, and that's okay. They don't have to be. As long as they'll fit in the box. And you may have to do a little trimming along the way, but you don't have to spend a ton of time getting these things exactly precise. Okay, now as you can see, I've got two 1-inch squares underneath of this. And now I've dropped the amp down inside, and I've still got the sides. The whole goal you're trying to achieve here is, at the end of the day, you do not want this piece of gear to be able to shuffle in any way, any direction. So you want to pack it tight all the way around. It's the shuffling or the movement of things that ultimately causes damage. At this point, you're going to want to use your tape measure, and you're going to want to measure the depth. And you're going to want to leave yourself a little room at the top here, 1 inch. So whatever you do, take 1 inch away from it, because you're going to want to put a solid top on it. So you're going to measure that. It shows up right there at 12 inches now at this point from here to here. So I'm going to go measure some square sheets that are, instead of being 12 inches high, or 11 inches high and 14 inches wide. And I'm going to do 2 of those for the front and 2 of those for the back. And this is exactly why I bought some 3/4 inch sheet too. If you'll notice, I've got 2 pieces back here that are 1 inch, 2 pieces here that are 1 inch, but I've still got a 3/4 inch slot right here that I need to fill in with a piece. And as you can see here, I'm just continuing to pack it all the way around. Now it's time to start packing it kind of from the top down to these transformers right here. And I will fill in this little space right here with some folded up bubble wrap. As you can see, I've got it going all the way across here and then here in this space, and I want to make sure that resistor that sticks up there doesn't get bent over or broke off. But now it's time to start filling it up here with foam. At this point, you've likely got a lot of leftover end pieces like this that you've been using. Feel free to use these things and kind of cut them down and wedge them in there to build this up to a certain level. Then we're going to want to put one more solid sheet here on the top. At this point, you can see we've got it built up and filled up all the way around, and now we have cut a final piece here that'll have to work in there a little bit, but that will drop down in there and complete the package. We'll be able to fold this up and tape it, and as you shake it, there's not absolutely any way anything can shuffle or shift inside this thing. So this is our inner box. Now we've got to make our outer box, and we're going to put this box inside the other outer box, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to fill the outer edges with the foam padding. Same process here. I put together the 16 by 16 by 16 box. Cut me a 16 by 16 inch sheet in the bottom. Now I'm going to drop this down in the big box down inside of that, fill in around the sides and on top, close it up. If you notice, we have just about 3/4 of an inch all the way around, so I'll be using the 3/4 inch size foam board for this. Alright, once again, we've got a top layer laid down in here, and got a little extra piece right here, so I'm going to fill that in. Going to fold this box over now, use the tape on it, and call this box a wrap. Alright, the other thing I'll do is I'll come along the edges with some tape and fold it over, and then I'll also run one across the other way, and I did that on the bottom as well. So this thing should be packed up and ready to go. I've got to do another one just like this. This was a dual set of mono blocks, and then I'm also boxing and packing the tubes separately. But I'll do the exact same process with those. So hopefully you learned something. I think this is the right way to do it. Yes, I used, between these two, I'll use $30 worth of packing material plus about $12 worth of boxes. But you know, this is a $3,000 or $4,000 set of amplifiers most likely, and it's just worth doing it. Even if it was a $600 piece of equipment, it's worth doing it right. Thanks for watching, everybody. All right, one final tip I'll leave you with. If you're buying a piece of equipment online from someone, don't be afraid. Send them a link to this video and say, hey, please watch this video. Would you mind packing my equipment as outlined in this video? Can't hurt. Thanks for watching, everybody.